Are you a gambling addict? Are you an alcoholic? Are you an addict to social media? Are you a adult content addict? It's very early on in the video. I have to be very careful what I say before I get it removed. Um, it's a question that, maybe you ask yourself sometimes, or maybe in some form of intervention you're asked by others. And I think sometimes we find it very hard to define an addict. There's this sort of expectation that you're an addict or you're not. And I don't think, speaking as one, that it's as simple as that, really. And that's what I want to talk about today. Firstly, I just want to say, hope you're keeping safe, hope you're keeping sane. If you're here for the Q&A video, the answers to your questions, that will be the next video I release. I've just recorded that. I'm going to edit it, so put the questions in and all that sort of thing. So that will take a little bit longer, but yeah, that will probably be the next video out. I really enjoy doing those sort of videos. So if you've got any questions for me, chuck them in the comments, and I'll make a follow-up maybe at some point. But yeah, do want to talk today about addiction and in its rawest form. And this actually came off the back of one of the questions that someone asked. Someone said, look, you talk a lot about going to the pub, you talk a bit about drinking. Do you think you're addicted to that? And I thought about it long and hard, and I think the answer I gave in the video was yes, but. And the reason I say yes, but is I had a crippling gambling addiction for years. Gambling dominated my life, and that's why this channel exists, and that's why I'm going to say hope you're keeping safe, hope you're keeping sane. Thank you for all your support on the channel. Thank you for all your questions. If you're not subscribed, please do hit that subscribe button. It really does. I really do appreciate it. It's lovely to see, and it's lovely to see you all answering each other's comments and helping each other out in the comment section. Really do, love to see that. So I think the critical underpinning of this video, at the risk of giving the game away early on, is that addiction isn't black and white, and the fact it isn't black and white is probably what makes it so dangerous. There's various stages in gambling addiction, and I'll tell you how I sort of relate this to my drinking in a bit. I started off playing 2p fruit machines as a kid on the seaside. Was I an addict? No, I enjoyed doing it. And then I went on and sort of started playing the bigger fruit machines, when I was in my teens or whatever. Was I an addict? Who knows? And then I became an adult, and then by the time I realised I was an addict, I'd been an addict quite a long time. But it wasn't as simple as going from casual gambler to addict. And even once you are aware of your addiction, even once you know that the addiction is causing you problems, and even once you've accepted that you need to do something about your gambling addiction, that isn't to say there isn't scope for your addiction to get worse. I've spoken before. I've had many lapses, many relapses in my time, and I always say that every time you lapse or relapse, your gambling addiction comes back stronger. Even when you think, that's it, I'm a helpless gambling addict. Gambling really has me, has me by the short and curlies, really has my number. I am in the grip of this. It can still get stronger. The addiction can still get worse, and you will still find there is scope for you to go to greater and greater lengths to feed this addiction. But that's the very, very far end of what is, I believe, quite a large scale. Look, as what seemingly a complete aside, I enjoy a takeaway on a Friday night. Me and my wife have this thing, we'll finish work, I'll pop to the pub, have a couple of pints, she'll come pick me up, we'll go and get takeaway. Lovely, really enjoy it. Am I addicted to 2 pints and takeaway on a Friday night? No, I'm not. All right, but would I be a bit annoyed? Not annoyed, disappointed, right? If for some reason I had to work late and we didn't get to have our Friday night tradition. Yes, I would. I'd be disappointed. Am I addicted to, fish and chips and a couple of pints in the pub? No, I'm not. But I'd be disappointed if I didn't have it. So how far is that away from addiction? If you play a video game, you really enjoy a particular video game, okay, and you play it, maybe have a few hours a night, or a couple of hours a night, or a couple of hours a week, or whatever. I don't know how long you play video games for, right? I'm not a gamer, right? If you couldn't play that game anymore, if the server crashed, all right, would you'd be disappointed, you'd be upset. Does that mean you're addicted? That's an open-ended question because I don't know the answer. You know, if I stopped going to the pub or I stopped having a glass of wine in the evening or whatever, would I get physical withdrawal? No. Would I, show the real withdrawal symptoms of someone who is alcohol dependent? No. Would it affect my mood? Yeah, probably. So in that instance, yes, I guess in some capacity I'm addicted. Now, this is the reason that gambling addiction and all the other addictions are so dangerous. Okay, it's because we can often assume, all right, that it's black and white. You're an addict or you're not. I'm not addicted. I can stop any time. As I think it was obviously it's an old adage, but I remember it from a Streets song. And I think that is almost the pivotal tipping point, isn't it? It's yeah, you can stop, but it's going to affect your mood. So therefore, there is addiction at play there. That was a bit of an aside, but the reason it's so dangerous is because there is that slope. Yeah, you can stop. You can stop a lot of the time. All right, it's not a full-blown addiction. It's not a full-blown compulsion. It's not that you're dependent upon it. All right, but if you try and extract it from your life, and there are either physical or psychological kickbacks from taking that thing away from you, there is a form of addiction there. And that can be at a real low level. If I went to the seaside as a child and I wasn't allowed to put 10p's in the 2p play fruit machines, yeah, I would have been kind of, I was looking forward to that. Okay? Now, when does that disappointment become addiction? And again, it's a rhetorical question because I don't know the answer. At the far end, though, we can see a very obvious addict, can't we? With a gambling addict, it would be the person putting the last of their wages on payday into a fob tee in the bookies and hitting it and getting really upset and emotional and talking to themselves and all those horrible things that people like to laugh at, but are symptoms of someone who's got a really serious gambling addiction. In the same way that if we think of someone really at the thick end of the wedge of alcoholism and alcohol addiction, we picture someone with drinking cheap cider on a park bench. They're very obviously in the grip of a really serious addiction. Okay, but by comparing ourselves to that, and I've spoken about stereotypes before, we can stereotype addicts, but it's very, very dangerous to do so because then we ignore the fact that we maybe are developing a problem because we are not there yet. We're not on the bench drinking cheap cider. We're not there smashing up the fob teas because we've lost the last of our wages. We can stop any time. We're in control. But we are somewhere, though, on that slope, and we are heading, generally speaking, only in one direction, and that's upwards. So it did ring true when someone asked me about, me going to the pub, because I do speak about going to the pub and having a few beers quite a lot. And it then becomes a point at which you have to become really, really self-aware. And this is the one thing I try and instill when I ever speak to younger people. Is, you can have a casual gamble. And most people, that's the thing, like, it doesn't matter how much you tell people not to do something, particularly if they're young, they want to go and experience it for themselves, and I understand that because I was the same. All right, so I'm not saying to young people who've never gambled before, don't have a footy bet or whatever. Ideally I'd say don't have a footy bet, but they're not going to listen. But if you go from doing it very, very infrequently to doing it a bit more frequently, to doing it maybe and thinking I might be doing this a bit too much, or questioning whether you're doing it a bit too much, all right? That is when you have to become seriously, seriously self-aware and address it before you go further and further up that slope towards what you perceive to be a real addict. And that's the thing, isn't it? Are we a real addict yet? Are we? I don't know. At what point are you a real addict? If it's substances, I include alcohol in that, but also lots of other substances, are you not a real addict until you're 6 feet under? And that's really the underlying thing. If you're a gambling addict, you're not a real addict until your wife's left you and you're homeless and you sold all your possessions and you're sleeping on a park bench. Is that when you're a real addict? Because we're all if you gamble, if you drink, if you take any kind of recreational substances, you're on that slope somewhere. Now you might be in the safe zone down the bottom, all right? Infrequent, isn't doing you any harm. You have it fully under control, all right? But be very aware when you start going up, because the more you go up that slope, the harder it is to come back down. All right, and that's kind of the answer to that. Just because gambling isn't causing you a lot of problems, the fact you're watching this video, the fact you might be questioning it, the fact you're looking at gambling addiction means that maybe there's something inside of you consciously or subconsciously, that's telling you, I'm not sure this is great. And like I say, I should have done the slope the other way around, because it doesn't make any sense. It's harder to come back down than it is to go up. But you know what I mean, right? The further you go down that path, the harder it is to turn back, right? So if you're questioning it, do look at it, right? Look at how much you're spending. Look at how much time. That's the most important thing. How much time you're spending doing it. Look at if it's having any impact on your life outside of maybe the financial implications. Are you, not being present at certain events because you're looking at your phone checking football scores? Are you late to things because you just, you've been playing something and you don't want to finish playing it, or you're waiting for a certain horse race or whatever, right? Look at it. Look at how it's affecting your life. And that will tell you whether you're an addict or not. Because I think in many capacities, if you're doing something that's harmful, if you're doing something that's addictive, probably most of us are addicts to some extent. It's controlling that addiction, it's keeping it at a manageable level, and it's stopping it from becoming something that will negatively impact the rest of your life. Stay safe and stay sane, everyone. Speak soon.